responsible Hibernia son. Sorry, I was getting that wrong for a long time. I didn't realize it was the Irish thing. Over recovering explosives in a shit-hit-the-fan environment. Generally speaking, I'd advise against it. I have in my family history a couple of situations where that kind of thing was part of somebody's job, very unwillingly. My grandparents were arrested in Poland during World War II, taken to Germany, used as slave labor. My grandfather, one of you get four grandparents in the mix, right? One of them was put to work at German rail yards, and that was one of the things they put slave labor up to. One of the problems that the Germans ran into is that they would have some of their own EOD teams, and then they had to train up other people to do that kind of stuff because that stuff would go off on somebody, and so they really liked to use prisoners for that. But then it kind of had to be a smarter than average prisoner, and then if it was somebody who was horribly mistreated and suicidal, well, there's a suicide bomb situation right there because he can at least take himself and a few guards out. And that kind of thing was happening there. If somebody really wanted to take out some Germans and they were just a prisoner and they were a slave and they weren't happy, they were given an option by the labor leader, the little labor gang leader in there. Okay, these guys are kind of going to go on the side, and they're going to screw something up, or something's going to happen, and guards will come over to them, and you whack this thing enough times with a rock, or a sledgehammer, or whack her with a sledgehammer, and the guards come over, your misery's over, but then you took out a few Germans, too. Yeah, and that was one of the things that was happening, and the Germans would try to minimize losses from that, but they're kind of stuck, because the other aspect of it is that they trust somebody enough to work alone around that, and then there's somebody who's unsupervised with explosives in a hostile area, which can lead to an even more effective suicide bomb. So, oh yes, there was suicide bombings used against Germans in World War II. And that was how those things, that was one of the ways those things would happen. And so when you're talking about using people who you value to handle UXBs or recover explosives out of the ground or landmines or something like that, to somebody who kind of knows a score on that, or that they will quickly figure that out, they're going to be like, oh, you put me on the worst fucking job you got. Oh, okay, asshole. So, not exactly the way to make friends unless it's somebody who's well rewarded and well paid. Now, in Iraq, especially, there was a lot of that stuff laying around. Afghanistan, there was an ongoing business in recovered explosives. People picking up landmines, grabbing landmines, because they were tended to be poor, and it was one of the ways they could get money, is to grab landmines. Landmines were worth money. Interestingly enough, the cruise missiles have around $20,000 worth of silver in them at any given time. There's a lot of silver used in the guidance systems on cruise missiles, and it has to do with the way this stuff would react to heat and atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the wire in a cruise missile is silver. So when somebody sees those cruise missiles flying in, it's like, well, it's going to wipe out your house, but if you can get to the guidance package on that missile, it's worth a ton of money. It's worth enough money to build another house, especially in that part of the world. The problem is that, and those things pretty much always explode. I mean, they're not going, but that guidance package, a big chunk of shit at the front, and part of it at the rear, a lot of the stuff's actually worth a huge amount of money just on precious metals. And so there were people who would specialize in recovering that, from what I hear. And then there's rewards given for some of the black box type stuff. If somebody gets a crashed aircraft or crashed missile or drone or something like that, black boxes are worth a bounty. So when somebody knows that there's a lot of bounties for battlefield pickup, that tends to be how that stuff gets obtained. And it's whoever's out collecting battlefield pickup bounties that's the highest person at risk. So whether it was Al-Qaeda in Iraq or some of the outfits in Afghanistan, they usually are going to recover that kind of stuff. They kind of want to recover that stuff by purchasing it. Now, whether or not somebody gains rank and status within a terrorist organization or a resistance organization, again, that's kind of a naming situation. Whether or not they would gain status or something like that is originally having been a person who recovered explosives on a battlefield pickup, or being recruited by an organization based on that previously established goal. That's possible. But for my type of situation, I wouldn't really be putting my people at risk at that. And if I need to move rocks, boulders, and trees, I really want to look at obtaining big yellow Tonka toys. And in a shit hit the fan situation, that stuff is laying around. Vehicles are not really something that would be in shortage in a shit hit the fan situation. You go outside even small town America, there's usually some yard out somewhere with a bunch of big yellow Tonka toys that aren't locked, that not too hard to hotwire. It's diesel fuel to make it run. They can be sitting for a long time and it run. It's tractor stuff. So they're just not that hard to obtain in the United States. In other parts of the world, that's a different situation. But generally speaking, if I need to move big rocks, big trees, or something like that, I really am more in the focus of getting my people into getting big yellow Tonka toys running, as opposed to playing with EOD, amateur EOD. I think that's just, it's a bad idea. And that's me with a lot of time as a combat engineer. I've had a lot of training with demo handling and all that, but I was not an EOD tech. It was like combat engineers go and get a bunch of EOD training. EOD guys will get combat engineer training, but they are separate MOSs. There was somebody trying to accuse me once of a stolen valor thing by claiming I was EOD. I tried to clarify the fact I was a combat engineer. Now, if somebody wants to call me a liar on that, do it in person, okay? But don't be surprised if I hurt your feelings over it. But this isn't directly to Hibernation, but it's this other guy. What was his name? It was another Polish name. It was kind of implying that I was lying about my military background in a place down in Southern California. But anyway, yeah, that's my take on it. Recovering explosives out of stuff is a bad idea. Getting some people trained up on that, so and so. I just think there's a liability problem with a lot of it, and there's a definite safety problem. And unless your group has people who you don't value that much, I would say, if that's something that there's other people in your area have been able to accomplish successfully, and they have their own expertise at that, you might consider doing business with them. But I don't like the idea. But it's safer than sending my own people out to grab landmines and stuff. That's a very specialized type of thing that I don't think is relevant to what we would be trying to build up in this whole community's defense, survival defense, VUCA thing. I would rather be looking at mechanical traps, mechanical security, barbed wire. There's other types of remote control things, which would be area denial type things. But there's really a lot that can be said for mechanical trap type stuff. The other thing is that if you're trying to do an area denial type thing, there's just other ways it can be done that are a little bit safer to put in place, a little bit more of a sure thing when you're trying to remove that stuff and get it all out of there in order to make an area workable again. And I just don't think it's the best topic to put into the circles on YouTube.